Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. I never thought that my next door neighbor, Karen, would turn out to be a deceptive, conniving individual. In our neighborhood, she was notorious for her rude behavior towards everyone except me. It was a puzzling exception, but I chose to embrace the advantages of having a pleasant neighbor, including her willingness to pet sit for me. Being occupied with a job that demanded frequent travel, I relied on Karen's help to take care of my 3 cats and dog. She claimed to love animals, and my pets seemed to genuinely like her. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. She earned a fair wage, while I saved on costly boarding expenses, ensuring my beloved companions were not confined to cages. However, as fate would have it, a horrifying incident shattered our harmony. Let me elaborate on the story of my prized possession, my 1969 Pontiac GTO Judge convertible, a classic car worth a staggering $500,000. I dedicated countless hours to restoring it, causing it to dominate the 2-car garage while my everyday vehicle sat outside. This is where the two narratives collided. To store my extra pet supplies, I entrusted Karen with a remote key to access the garage. Naively, I never fretted about my classic car's safety, assuming Karen had no knowledge of or interest in automobiles. I even installed an additional locked gate inside the garage to provide an added layer of protection. Yet, in hindsight, I realize how foolish I had been to give anyone unrestricted access to my garage. Returning home from a trip, I eagerly anticipated reuniting with my furry companions. My exuberant dog welcomed me with his usual leaps, while the cats gracefully acknowledged my presence before ignoring me. Animals, with their distinct behaviors, never cease to amuse. Little did I know that this day would thrust me into a heart-wrenching ordeal. When I ventured into the garage to fetch some cat litter, I encountered a locked door, an ordinary sight. However, upon entering, my world crumbled before my eyes. The gate safeguarding my cherished car had been violently shattered, and the vehicle itself had vanished into thin air. Panic engulfed me, and I found myself on the cold garage floor, suffering a full-blown panic attack for what seemed like an eternity. Barely regaining composure, I mustered the strength to review the security camera footage. Racing through the recordings, I stumbled upon a shocking revelation. Karen had repeatedly entered my garage under the guise of collecting pet supplies, only to leave empty-handed. On her final visit, she was accompanied by 2 unidentified men who loaded my car's parts into their truck, exchanging cash with Karen. The following day, an unfamiliar man wielding a sledgehammer arrived, and together they orchestrated the heist, hoisting my precious vehicle onto a car transport. Enraged and fueled by a righteous fury, I stormed toward Karen's house, my pounding fists demanding justice. She must have sensed the wrath on my face because she rushed to defend herself, launching into an incoherent tirade. Our conversation was marred by her repeated interruptions, but amidst the chaos, a snippet of our interaction stands out. Karen, don't give me that look. Your car was a worthless relic, collecting dust in your garage. I discovered its exorbitant value and realized I deserved compensation for all I did for you. I could have sued you, but instead, I sold something you clearly had no intention of utilizing. You should be thanking me for freeing up space for your other car. Her audacity sent me over the edge. Me. Thanking you? That car was an irreplaceable gem, one of the rarest in existence, not to mention the thousands of dollars worth of parts you callously sold. Call those men immediately and retrieve every last piece. Karen, I won't do that. Besides, I'm pretty sure it's illegal for you to spy on me with those cameras. You're the one in the wrong here. Refusing to succumb to her manipulations, I pursued legal action, pressing charges of grand theft auto. The police, aided by the license plate number captured on the security footage, located my stolen car. Miraculously, it remained unharmed. Karen, desperate to salvage her fabricated story, declared herself my mother and the car's rightful owner. Thankfully, I possessed the proof of purchase for every component and undeniable video evidence of her illicit transactions. The court forced her to reimburse me for all the losses incurred. Unrelenting in her denial, Karen attempted to deflect blame, citing my surveillance as an invasion of her privacy. However, the court swiftly dismissed her feeble arguments. Subsequently, she faced arrest, charged with grand theft auto and fraud for falsely claiming ownership. Only through the support of her friends was she able to secure bail, narrowly avoiding imprisonment. Instead, she received probation and a restraining order, warning her to steer clear of me. Lesson learned. In the future, I will opt for boarding services to ensure the safety of my beloved pets, and invest in comprehensive surveillance systems to safeguard my home. The harrowing experience has taught me to be vigilant and wary of those who may disguise their true intentions, even behind a facade of neighborly kindness. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Backstory: my neighbor, whom we will call David, not real name, and my other neighbor, whom we will call Karen, not real name, often got into arguments about who owns what part of the property. They live right next to each other, so this is understandable. Karen was known for being a Karen, so this explains a lot. Karen had just gotten engaged to her boyfriend, whom we will call Kyle, not real name, who went over to her house a lot. Like every other day, he would spend the night there. We saw his car parked there a lot. Kyle would park his car in front of David's lawn because Karen is part of a large family, so they have many cars. Therefore, there is not enough room in the driveway. David got a new camper recently, one of those massive ones that are practically buses. They needed a place to park it because they didn't feel comfortable leaving it in a public place, but Kyle's car was there. Around this same time, news was spreading around my neighborhood that Kyle and Karen had gotten married. Kyle moved in with Karen and started using the front of David's lawn as his assigned parking spot. He was told that it was part of her property because Karen was a dummy and didn't understand that property lines exist. There was an incident in the past with a bench and another with a few trees. Eventually, David got tired of Kyle parking where they wanted to park their camper. He had been having to park it down the road in the public camper places, or whatever they are called. He began plotting his revenge. His plan was to park the camper in front of Kyle's car so that he would have to pull out backwards. This way, he would have to struggle to get his car out between one of Karen's siblings' cars and the camper. When this plan happened, Kyle came running up to David's door and began shouting the usual, "I'm calling the cops," and whatnot. When David didn't answer, he tried to inch his way out. He ended up bumping into the car behind him and putting a good-sized dent in it. He instantly ran up to Karen's sibling and began apologizing and blamed it on David. Now Karen's entire family was mad at David. David said he saw this through the window and was laughing hysterically. Karen actually managed to think logically for once and blamed it on Kyle, but it was okay, and insurance will cover it, or something like that. Kyle began going off on Karen about how insurance would charge him for the damage, so they ended up fighting about insurance or whatever. This whole thing unraveled outside David's house, so he listened in through the open window. Then they came up to his house. David answered the door, and all of them but Karen instantly started going off about how he caused a dent in Karen's sibling's car. He said that Kyle's car was parked on his property, and that he needed to park his camper somewhere. He dug out the property line drawing or whatever and showed them all. Karen was pissed. Karen said that he had drawn those lines himself and that the actual lines were farther to the left, giving her more property, and expanding past where Kyle was parked. Keep in mind, Kyle was parked by the windows of David's house, clearly on David's property. At this point, I could hear yelling from a few houses down and walked over to listen for that sweet, sweet internet karma. Karen ended up calling the cops because David was disturbing the entire neighborhood. 2 cops showed up in a car and instantly sided with David after reviewing the property lines. Karen was fined over $700 for misusing cop. Kyle ended up having to pay $900 for the damages done to the other car. Apparently he broke part of the engine or something. That's not all. Karen and Kyle ended up divorcing because Karen lied to him and said he was on her property. And Karen saying that it was her house so she could lie if she wanted, and other things of the sort. The next one is a petty revenge story. My friend Stan has worked at the Valuation Office of Assessments, VOA, for his local council for the past 35 years. He's got a lot of stories, but this is my favorite. For context, the VOA is responsible for evaluating which council tax band a property should be in. The higher the band, the more council tax you pay. For those outside the UK, council tax is used to fund civic services such as schools, rubbish collection, and emergency services, etc. Which band you get depends on lots of different factors, but generally speaking, the more a property is worth, the higher the band is likely to be. Changes to a property that significantly increase its value, such as getting pools or extensions built, can sometimes mean a property has to be reassessed to see if it needs to go up a band. There was a woman, let's call her Mildred, who would regularly call Stan's office to report her neighbors for everything. Mildred was a typical nosy neighbor curtain twitcher who made it her life's mission to know everyone's business. Her hobby was reporting her neighbors to the police, HMRC, UK equivalent of the IRS, immigration, and of course the VOA. To give you an idea of just how awful this woman was, here are a few stories various neighbors told Stan and his colleagues. One neighbor got reported to HMRC because he came home with a fancy new car, therefore he must be evading tax. It was a 5-year-old Mondeo he'd just bought secondhand. Another neighbor was reported because Mildred didn't think their child looked sick enough to be off school, so she reported them for truancy. The child had recently had an emergency appendectomy and they were at home recovering, as per their doctor's orders. Everyone in Stan's department hated this woman. Not only did she add to their already heavy workload, but she was also rude, entitled, and generally unpleasant to talk to. She often exaggerated her reports to ensure somebody would be sent to inspect the property. Worse still, her reports often caused her neighbors to call and shout at Stan and his colleagues, understandably so. But what they hated most of all was that they were obligated to follow up on any report she made, and she never got in trouble for giving false or exaggerated reports. They knew she was just a mean old lady, and they didn't want to enable her behavior. But policy was policy. Well, one day Stan drew the short straw and took a call from the dreaded Mildred. My neighbors at number 61 added a new bedroom to their house, and they got a new kitchen in with an extension, and he put up a new shed. I bet they haven't reported it, Mildred whined. I demand somebody reevaluate them immediately. If I have to pay my taxes, so do they. Stan begrudgingly sent a letter out to the neighbor at number 61, let's call him Bob, feeling very sorry for him. A few days later, Bob called, clearly fed up. Bob explained that he had checked with the office before getting the work done, and he had been told that the work was not significant enough to be reported, so he didn't report it. There was a note on Bob's account confirming this. Throughout the whole conversation, Bob was friendly and nice. He knew Stan had a job to do. When the inspector attended Bob's property, Mildred stared gleefully from behind her curtains. However, the joke was on her because the inspector uncovered that Bob's house had mistakenly been put on the wrong band for over a decade. He should have been on a much lower one. This meant Bob was due a massive rebate for overpaying his council tax for years. Stan laughed his arse off when the report came to his desk. He was delighted to call Bob and give him the good news. Here's the petty part. After the two had a good chuckle about everything, Bob told Stan he would use some of the money to throw a big Duck You BBQ garden party. He would invite all his neighbors, except for Mildred. Bob mentioned he might get some banners made for the party that said, "Duck You, Mildred," but Stan warned him that could get him in legal trouble. So instead, Bob decided the banners would say, "Thanks for the money, Mildred," instead. So, Bob threw his big flashy garden party, complete with banners he got printed, while Mildred seethed from behind her curtains, knowing she was responsible for Bob's sudden windfall. Mildred continued to report her neighbors for every little thing, so I guess she didn't learn her lesson. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Back when I was in high school, a long time ago, whenever an important date approached, for example, Independence Day, etc., we would line up in the courtyard and have to stand still in formation. One of the teachers would then give a speech about the date and its importance. Those speeches would usually be around 10-15 minutes long, about as long as it was humanly possible to keep 150 teenagers lined up and standing still in formation and listening. The teacher giving the speech would rotate among all the faculty, and since there were quite a few teachers, each teacher would give a speech once a year or less. There was one notable omission on the teacher's roster: the mechanography teacher. This would age the post really well, I guess. He never gave a speech. Let's call him Mech. He would always refuse and get away with it for whatever reason. In around 30 or so years of teaching at the school, it became famous that he never gave a speech. Until one day, when I guess the dean got out of bed on the wrong foot or whatever, and he absolutely demanded that Mech give the speech. There was no way to get away with it. Mech would have to do it. His first speech in 30 or so years at the school. Even some of the faculty, former students of Mech themselves, were excited to see the outcome of this power struggle between Mech and the dean. So we lined up in the courtyard, 150 students, 15, 20 teachers, etc., etc., and Mech took the stand and the mic with definitely a smirk of malicious compliance on his face. And he delivered. More than 45 minutes of an absolutely drowsy speech, telling every single minute detail and fact about the date in question. For the students, it was torture. Having to stand still and silent for almost an hour, failing to do so was one of the most punishable offenses, trying not to fall asleep on our feet. The dean tried to stop Mech twice. The first time, Mech completely ignored the dean. The second time, Mech plainly told the dean, "You wanted me to give the speech, deal with it, for the whole audience to hear." Around 35 minutes in, some of the older "I don't give a damn anymore" students started shouting things at Mech. Not hurtful things, but colorful commentaries about the speech. We started laughing. Mech carried on as if nothing happened. The dean tried to take the stand to demand silence. Mech denied the dean, saying, "I'm not finished yet." That day, we lost probably 1 hour and 30 minutes of teaching time. We ended up hating Mech for the torture he put us through. When he finished, the dean had no choice but to give us a short, unscheduled break before returning to class. Over the years, I realized what an absolute masterpiece of malicious compliance Mech delivered. Mech never gave a speech again at the school. The next one is an entitled people story. Having a family that knows about your Reddit account has its disadvantages. Yesterday, my sister called me after I got off work to ask me if comments are still coming in. She said she cannot bear the negativity of looking at them herself because the comments are also hurtful towards her. So I was brutally honest. At least 10 comments are still coming in daily, and most of them more or less say the same things about her. She started crying and demanding I delete my Reddit posts. But I refused and told her she can cry to anyone she wants. But the posts stay up because they are my assurance she won't try to treat me like crap anymore. After all, she literally felt like my life should revolve around hers, didn't pay me the babysitting money she was supposed to, and pocketed it for herself, and forced me to be the constant babysitter on last year's family vacation, so I had pretty much no fun the entire time. Is it really any wonder people are having so much hate for her when she treated me like that? Then when I mentioned the posts have already spread to other websites because I was asked a couple of times to let an article be made about my situation, and there are some videos that were read as well. My sister shrieked hearing that and hung up. My parents then called me, begging I take the posts down. I've refused and stated that I only did this because they didn't stick up for me. This would have never happened if they'd told my sister to treat me like an equal and not a servant. I'm not her butler, babysitter, or handyman. I'm her freaking brother, and a grown-ass man. Wouldn't they be tired of this crap in my shoes too? They agreed, but still begged I take the post down. I refused and said that I'll keep making more if they don't start sticking up for me more when my sister comes crying to them. Let her clean up her own messes. Because all the enabling of her led to this. I didn't father those kids. I've got a life of my own, a career I'm still new to, and hopefully soon enough, a girlfriend as there's someone I want to ask out. I'm moving my life forward and I won't be held back. They can either step out of my way or keep trying to enable my sister, but I assured them that the latter would end badly for them. The only way this posting on Reddit will stop is if the drama stops. I've kept things anonymous and I've got a right to vent my very valid frustrations. Well, that left my mother crying. My father just went silent, and I said, tears don't move me. They know what it'll take to end this, and that's to stop enabling my sister. Well, my sister called me again to yell at me that our parents have told her they aren't dealing with this anymore and to figure it out herself. Oh, and they told her to be nicer to me too. I just pictured her eye twitching as she internally screamed after hearing that. Be nice to my kid brother? What is this? Do I look it up on Google? Yeah, I was that sarcastic to her. But it left her crying too when I hung up. My brother-in-law called me later to get my side of the story. He was mad I'm still posting and made his wife cry. But I explained everything to him, and he said he'd have another talk with my sister. I'm hoping this drama finally ends here. But the family vacation is still on for late June. I've already booked my room and put in for a day off work so we can all leave on a Friday. My room is also not near the ones my parents, sister, brother-in-law, and nephews will be using. In fact, it's not even on the same floor. And when we go to the coast, when it's not a family activity, I'm going to go where I want and do what I want. And you can bet I'm going to tour those art galleries, pig out on local food, and just enjoy being carefree for a change. The next one is an entitled parent story. My 28M stepmother, 49F, is a wannabe party planner. She has taken it upon herself to plan and host every party and holiday my dad's family has thrown since she married him. I never loved those occasions growing up. She's controlling and gets upset if people complain about anything, but humored her for my dad's sake. According to him, this helps her feel included. I'm getting married to my fiancée Jane, 26F, in July. We got engaged in early 2021, but Jane ended up getting pregnant a couple of months after that, and we decided to postpone the wedding to focus on our son for a while. So we've had a long engagement. My stepmother has tried to hijack our wedding plans from day one, complaining, contacting our planner, showing up unannounced to Jane's dress appointments, etc. and we have repeatedly asked her to stop. Dad wants us to humor her, but she's clearly resentful of the fact that she's not hosting the wedding or being labeled mother of the groom in invitations. Besides our baby boy, we also have Luke, 4M, Jane's paternal half-brother. She got custody of him a few months into our relationship after his parents died. I ended up moving in with them during the pandemic and have been in Luke's life since he was a baby. He doesn't call me dad and refers to us as his sister and his OP, but we love him like a son. Stepmother, though, hates Luke. She accuses Jane of baby-trapping her way into the family. That accusation only got worse after our son was born. My dad gets along with Jane and adores the kids, but the stepmother demands him to refuse babysitting Luke, so we don't leave the kids with them often. Instead, Jane's brother and CIL usually watch the kids for us, as their children are close to ours in age. We had a thing last Sunday, and my BIL was out of town with his family. Jane's other siblings live in different cities, as well as my mom and sister. My dad agreed to babysit at our place, and we left. We came back to find both kids crying, the stepmother screaming, and Dad weakly trying to calm everyone down. Apparently, Luke had told the stepmother that both he and our son were going to be our ring bearers, and she went ballistic. She screamed that she wasn't going to allow that because he wasn't family. She then hurt him when he started crying. His lip is still split. She'd never gotten to this point before. We immediately banned her from our house and from our wedding. Dad is fuming and has said he's not going without her. He's also convinced half of his side of the family, by severely downplaying what the stepmother did, to boycott the wedding as well. This includes my stepbrother, who fully agrees with his mother no matter how many times I try to tell him the truth. Jane and I are refusing to budge, but many of my cousins who aren't coming anymore are asking us to reconsider. Pretty much all of Jane's family agrees with us, but one of her aunts has suggested that maybe the stepmother is acting out because she doesn't feel welcomed by my family. I've honestly had it with my family enabling her behavior. I love my dad and really want him at my wedding, but I am more than willing to go no contact if it means protecting my family. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.